But like going back into the mechanical engineering side of things and going into the control of a product, the process control, right? Knowing things like controlling degrees of freedom is huge on the mechanical engineering side of things. And what is controlling the degrees of freedom? It means to control an object, right? Can it move in the X direction, the Y direction, the Z direction? And are you controlling it in all those different directions? How easily or how hard is it to control, right? Is the surface a porous surface, or is the surface flat surface, or is it a shiny surface? Is there these type of things that you should keep in mind? And variants, like how many variants of a product there are, right? And so these are things that for us as a company, you know, we're analyzing and have to identify, we have to be able to solve for. So we want to be able to hire people who can solve for these same type of issues, right? We want to hire people that understands like how to control a product. And a lot of these things can be very like intuitive, right? You don't have to have a college degree to understand I need to hold this product and I need to ensure that it doesn't move in any direction, which would be like the degrees of freedom. You need to control the degrees of freedom. But then taking that to the next step, taking that to an engineering level, right? Now that you have, okay, I need to have degrees of freedom as something that is in my mind, now you can start researching deeper into like how to control degrees of freedom, how to contain a part, how to grip a part, how to hold a part, right? Because depending on the different things that I mentioned, like if it's a solid material, if it's a shiny material, like all of these things are components that kind of change the way that you need to handle a product. If it's shiny, maybe you have to use a different type of sensor because it'll reflect off, you know? So these are things that you can kind of do some research into that will then give you the ability to speak on these things. And I think that's the most important thing when it comes to these job interviews. It's not like a particular thing that of advice that we could narrow down and say, hey, learn this thing. I mean, sure, we can say learn about some PLCs, we can say learn about some robots, learn about degrees of freedom, and these are all very, very good things to learn, right? But it's kind of just a matter of knowing the job that you're going to be applying for, the type of career that you're looking for. You know, like I said, a lot of these things are gonna like change quite a bit. Like you don't need to know a ton about PLCs if you're gonna be doing some type of mechanical engineering work or mechanical assembly work, and vice versa. You don't need to know a ton about mechanical engineering to do a lot of the PLC programming and the robot programming. However, I do suggest that the degrees of freedom thing, like for me, controls engineering, like I'm a controls engineer, but I also understand fundamentally how to like control products, right? And that's important too, because the programmer person has to be able to identify that process is not being controlled tightly enough to be able to program around that, right? Because mechanically, if things are not controlled tightly enough, you can't always program in solutions for that. Sometimes you have to go back to the mechanical engineering and say, hey, this thing needs to be mechanically engineered better. Anything that comes to mind, or also if you're experienced in this field, like what are some things that generally come up in your job interviews?